And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and as always, next to me is my co-host Laraib, as we are super excited to kick off the 2023 NFL season after taking a little bit of a hiatus. No real NFL news going down this off season that we didn't cover already. But we're super excited. We are about 3 weeks left until we get into the NFL season. And yeah, we're just really excited to be back. Laraib, you want to tackle anything before we start this?
No, like you mentioned, we had a little bit of break before the season started, but here we are. Of course, it felt like a really long time, Lewis, a huge break, but now it's finally here. Everyone's gearing up for their fantasy football playoffs. Getting ready for that season. Myself, of course, will be in New Orleans for the next upcoming season, Lewis.
Woo!
So we might be attending a lot of Saints games. So maybe with my lease
Might
for my
be.
apartment, I might have also signed a 1-year lease to be a New Orleans Saints fan. I don't know. I'm still rocking the Seahawks jersey for sure, but we'll be attending a lot of Saints games this year, Lewis. But without further ado, let's get into what we want to discuss today. Of course, early in the season, before the season actually starts, there's a lot of value to be had when you're looking at some of these sports lines. A lot of teams might be undervalued, some teams that might be overvalued, some players that might, get some extra yards here or there. So that's what we want to discuss today, Lewis. And so, we're going to go through some of our favorite overs, some of our favorite unders, maybe some long shots that we like. Cause like I said, this is where you can get a lot of good value and make some good money off of this if you're really into this stuff, Lewis. So why don't we just go ahead and get into it, Lewis? What is your favorite over for this year? What teams are you looking at, or what players are you looking at that could potentially have an over?
Right. So I like to do a thing the last 2 years, kind of go through the NFL schedule and just gut feeling, go through game by game. Oh, okay. Win, loss, win, loss. Without really looking at the only information I really have is home or away. It could be a Thursday night game. It could be a Sunday night game. I really don't have access to that. That's kind of go through making my gut predictions. And one thing that I was shocked by is that a certain team that I like, but I didn't really think, have too high of expectations going into the season. I'd like some of the offseason moves that they made. And I've always liked their roster and especially their history, their coaching staff, things like that. But I was going through the schedule, Rob. I was shocked to see how much this schedule really looks favorable for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, Laraib. They're currently slated at 8.5 wins on FanDuel as it stands. And I love that number a ton. Now, the biggest meme you're going to hear is Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season in his career. So, of course, you're not going to do under 8.5 because that would mean a losing season. Well, no, not necessarily. Not only do I think they're not going to have a losing season, I think they're going to skyrocket over this 8.5 number. Maybe not too much, but I would not be surprised to see an 11-win Pittsburgh Steelers team this year, Rob. So going over their win total by 2 games, I think is very possible. And let me just go through the schedule with you so you can kind of understand what my thought process was. So they start the season at home against San Francisco, and normally that's a pretty rough opener, but with questions at the quarterback for the 49ers, and Pittsburgh week 1 is a really tough place to play. And I think this defense will give that 49ers team a lot of problems early on. And I'm not, we're not going to go through our weekly picks yet, but that is a game where I like the Steelers at home. If that number is over 3, I'm definitely feeling the Steelers in that one. But moving on, you then have Cleveland at home, at Vegas, at Houston, and then home Baltimore before your bye week. If you can win that home Baltimore game and then win games against Cleveland and Las Vegas, who I really do not think will be that good this year, you could start the year 5-0 potentially, at worst 3-2 going into your bye. And then out of the bye, you then have at the Rams, home for Jacksonville, home for Tennessee, home for Green Bay. I mean, those are extremely winnable games. Have an identity. They have an identity of a tough defense, a run-first offense, and another year of Kenny Pickett, who I think will only get better, year 2 in this offense, working under Matt Canada. I think they're really going to start figuring things out on that side of the ball. And he showed strides towards the end of the season, really, connecting with these the young receivers on the team. I'd like, they brought in the the tackle out of Georgia for their first round pick. They bring in the tight end out of Georgia. Their emphasis was beefing up the interior of this offense and, helping out their rookie star quarterback. It seems like they're investing into him, surrounding him with weapons. You still have Deontay Johnson. Year 2 of George Pickens is really exciting. And I really like, the defense is always going to be great under Mike Tomlin. He's still got TJ Watt over there, Minka Fitzpatrick, a bunch of standouts. So I love this at a over 8.5. I am slamming this number, Laraib.
Yeah, Lewis, real great points about that team. And of course, history is definitely on your side with the Tomlin thing, with him never having a losing season, Lewis. But a team that I really, really love, Lewis, a playoff team from last year who's being severely undervalued with the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL this season. It is the New York Giants, Lewis, with Brian Daboll and coming into his second year as a head coach. You talk about some of the teams they have to play this year. Arizona Cardinals might have the worst record in the whole league, Lewis. The Washington Commanders twice a year. The Las Vegas Raiders. The New England Patriots. The Los Angeles Rams, who potentially could be one of the worst.
The Seattle Seahawks.
Potentially could be one of the worst teams in the NFL this season, Lewis. For this Giants team, I feel like Brian Daboll, he kind of lit up this team last year, and with another notch under his belt for this year, I think that team's going to have a standout performance. Now you have guys like Daniel Jones, who just got signed to an extension, Lewis. He's going to be one to playing hard. And of course, the big thing that's been going around this offseason, Lewis, is running backs have been severely undervalued. Not being paid. Now, I know you and I agree that, we maybe don't like to pay those running backs, but Saquon Barkley signed a 1-year contract, Lewis, for around $10 million, $11 million. And I think he's going to have something to prove this year. And now this Giants team with the easiest schedule, I think they are going to be the team that runs MetLife this year.
So what was the number at, Laraib?
7.5.
7.5.
For a team that went to the playoffs last year and went on the road to beat the Minnesota Vikings. I think this team has a lot of guts, Lewis. They have a lot of moxie. I think they are the pride and joy of New York. And I think, everyone's really hot on the Jets right now, but I like this Giants team.
I will say they were one of the teams last year. We're going to get into some of the teams with like a big thing that we have been looking at is strength of schedule and, things like that. And they were a big beneficiary, Laraib, last year of having one of the easiest schedules in all of the NFL. So now you say their schedule isn't that bad.
It's the easiest. It's the easiest this year.
I don't know, Laraib. I think I have to disagree with that. I don't know, what the metrics are that say they have the easiest schedule. You have to play the Cowboys and the Eagles 4 times a year. Those are really tough games, and you do not play well against either of those teams. So that might be 4 losses for you. Then you also play the Seahawks and the 49ers, 2 playoff teams last year. You also play the Dolphins and the Bills. And a lot of people think the Jets are going to be better. A lot of people think that New England's going to be better. So those are another 4 tougher games. Plus, you throw in an extra game against Green Bay in there, which, who knows what they're going to be this season. And this schedule is sneaky difficult for a team that won a lot of close games last year. Even starting with their first game of the year, going for 2. That was Daboll's signature win against the Titans. So I have them at 8 wins. I think 7.5 is a very low line, but I do like some of their additions they made. I like bringing in Darren Waller for a legit option for Daniel Jones in the passing game, who really takes the pressure off the middle of the field and makes, it's a really tough play action game with Darren Waller in the middle versus I don't even know who they had at tight end last year. And that Daboll likes to use his tight ends like he did in Buffalo a few years ago. So I do like it slightly, but I'm not a huge fan of this number, Laraib. But let's go ahead and talk about teams that we are actually not huge fans of. And Laraib, give me your biggest under for this year.
My biggest under, Lewis, has to be the Chicago Bears. Now, this team has a line of 7.5, Lewis. And, you're going to say Justin Fields might take a step up this year. They brought in some guys like DJ Moore. Of course, they traded for Chase Claypool for last season. But I just don't understand how a team who is not able to pass the ball in 2022 is going to be able to do that in 2023. I know Justin Fields is an amazing talent through the ground. Of course, a lot of people like his rushing prop this year, but I don't understand how this team in a division, like you said, with the Vikings, who may be the potentially frauds from last season, but the Lions are good. The Packers, we don't know what they're going to be, but this Bears team, really, Lewis, has not shown me anything this offseason that makes me think that they can climb to 7.5 wins. Now, I will say the NFC this year is a little, little down on talent. I wouldn't say they stack up to the AFC as well. And this NFC is wide open for any team to take besides the Eagles and the 49ers. And so for this Bears team, I just don't understand what happened this offseason that makes people think that they can get to that 7.5 win total.
Yeah, Laraib, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm not a huge fan of Justin Fields, but I will say it's not like you shouldn't invest in him as a passer, because we saw at Ohio State, he was perfectly capable of being a volume passer in big games. We saw that against Georgia. We saw that against Clemson. He has the capability to do that. So there's nothing against, like, you bring in a guy like DJ Moore, you buff up one of the worst. They had the worst offensive line in the league last year. You bring in guys to help supplement that. You bring in some help at the tight end position. And then defensively, I like the linebackers they brought in. Now, giving up Roquan Smith last year certainly is head scratching, but you bring in Terrell Edmonds, you bring in TJ Edwards. I think that's good help there to kind of beef up one of the worst, absolute worst rushing defenses in the league last year. So that should help in some aspects. They have a young, decent secondary. The defensive line really leaves a lot to be desired. But in this division, Laraib, I think all these teams are just kind of middling around like a mid potential. And if, close games break a certain team's way, things could change. But yeah, at that number, I'm not a big fan. I kind of like it, at the 7 number, to be honest with you. But could they win a few close games here or there based off of a scramble from Justin Fields? Maybe. This team and the future of this team heavily relies on what he will be able to do as a passer, like you mentioned, Laraib. And we haven't seen enough to really believe in that. So I really do. I like that under that you said. But I have an under I think is going to be a little more hot takey by the way this team has been covered as of late. And that team is the New York Jets, Laraib. The New York Jets, the hard knock sweethearts. Laraib, they have one of the hardest schedules in the entire NFL. And at a number of 9.5 from a team that won only 7 games last year, you bring in Aaron Rodgers, and it's easy to say Aaron Rodgers, over the combination of Mike White, Zach Wilson, and Joe Flacco. Yeah, that should be an extra 3 wins. But it really isn't, because your schedule was pretty not easy last year, but you had a lot of good, free wins on there. You had that miraculous comeback against the choking Browns. There were so many games against the Raiders that were really like, your defense brought you over. And the only time you ever beat a team by double-digit points was, guess who, Laraib? What team did they beat by double-digit points last year?
Who was it, Lewis? Your New
How
Orleans
about
Saints.
the Green Bay Packers and Aaron freaking Rodgers? And a lot of the belief is, new system. You look at the stats from the past few seasons, Laraib, he has just not been the same Aaron Rodgers. And this is over a large sample size. He has not thrown for over 300 passing yards in over 26 games, Laraib. This is not, your mom and dad's or your older brother or sister's Aaron Rodgers. This is the new Aaron Rodgers, who's going to need to rely on a running game and a good offensive line to, feel secure and hit these targets. And everyone's oohing and eyeing at the Garrett Wilson, the Breece Hall, the Ahmad Gardner, all these big players. Their offensive line really leaves nothing to desire. It's a bunch of young, injury-prone talent that, Aaron Rodgers, he has to trust. He has to believe in these guys. It won't be the same, core guys that you had in Green Bay for years. Your Bakhtiaris, your Corey Linsleys, your Elton Jenkins. These is a completely new slate. And you have to trust these guys. And then you have a big question mark at running back with Breece Hall. I love Garrett Wilson, and I like some of these receiving options on the team. And I think he will put up good numbers this season. But I just don't believe it to where they will get double-digit wins this season just because they added Aaron Rodgers. I need to see it to believe it, Laraib. But this front part of the schedule is so brutal, where you face Buffalo at Dallas, New England, which you could win, Kansas City, at Denver, Philadelphia. Then you have a bye week. And going out of the bye week, you have the Giants and the Chargers. In none of those games should they be heavy favorites, except for maybe New England. But they also have not beaten New England since the Broncos won the Super Bowl last. So, I mean, like, this is a very, very tough. I don't blame you for that faith, but 9.5 is just a really big number, Rob.
Yeah, Lewis, and I think you and I can agree. There's nothing more than we would like to see than Aaron Rodgers lose. Of course, like you mentioned, he had that great offensive line in Green Bay. And even when one guy was out, they always had somebody missing. He still had a lot of other guys to protect him in there. But I think he's going to have a rude awakening in New York, like you mentioned, with a bad offensive line. He brings his guys over, Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, but Randall Cobb is just, washed up as hell. Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard have to carry that offense. And then on the defense, I think that's going to be their strong point this season, Lewis. When Quinnen Williams is in there, he's just absolute dominant for them, and how they can just change the game whenever he's in there. He just musters so many sacks, Lewis. And Sauce Gardner, of course, he won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year when my Tariq Woolen should have won that. So, Lewis, I agree with you on that one. But quickly, let's moving on to the next one. Let's go over our player props, Lewis. Now, I got one right here that might stun you just a little bit. Courtland Sutton over 675 receiving yards. Now, I know what you're going to say, Lewis. This Broncos team, last year Russ Wilson wasn't playing that well. Courtland Sutton's been up and down his whole career, injured, missed a lot of games here and there. But he has hit this mark every single year, Lewis, except for one where he only played one game that season. And now with Russell Wilson year 2, Sean Payton comes in as a head coach. I think this year Courtland Sutton continues the trend of hitting over his mark of 675, Lewis. And there's a great line. Of course, everyone likes to pay attention to Jerry Jeudy, the standout from Alabama. But I think Courtland Sutton is a great deep threat for Russell Wilson. If we see some of those moon balls going deep down the field of Courtland Sutton, I think he easily passes his mark, Lewis.
Yeah, I really like that number too, Rob. That's a very good one. It's a belief. He's hit that number every year, like you mentioned. And you think with Sean Payton, who really does like a dominant X receiver, and that's who Courtland Sutton is, that's a good belief. My prop, similar to my Steelers belief, I like Kenny Pickett over 32.75 passing yards. It's a simple belief. I think the offense will be better this season. I think they'll put more faith into Kenny Pickett's hands. And now he has a full season to operate. So if he's healthy and if he just gets over 200 passing yards a game, which seems very possible for Kenny, then he should be able to eclipse this mark and with no problem at all. And I think against some of the passing defenses they are going to play, he should hit this mark. If he just gets 3,400 yards, which is he was on track to get last season, I think with a full season of health and with the upgrades of the offensive line, he should be able to crush that mark, Laraib. But then, Laraib, I want you to give me some long shots that you're feeling. Maybe some player props, some team props, just some high odds props that you like, and say, hey, maybe I'll take a flyer on this one.
Well, something that I really love, Lewis, it's my guy, Jay Herbo, to lead the league in passing yards at plus 650. Now, we know Patrick Mahomes is the number one at plus 350, but right next to him, Herbert at plus 650. I think that's a huge jump for two guys who are going to be on the same caliber level this year. I think I like Herbert to lead the league. Of course, they bring in rookie wide receiver Quentin Johnson, who's been standout in practice, but the trio of wide receivers that they have, along with Austin Eckler, and just a team that has something to prove this year after that embarrassing playoff loss. I think my guy Herbert, after signing a huge extension, goes and passes for 6,000 yards this season and leads the league in
6,
passing yards.
Okay, yeah, I don't know about 6,000, but that's not a terrible long shot. For me, speaking of the quarterback position, I'm gonna go for a little homer pick this year. I like Derek Carr throwing for over 30 touchdowns this season. Now, he's done this before, and you're thinking, well, he didn't do it last year, so what's to think that he can do it this year without Devontae Adams? Well, you have Chris Olave, you have a lot of good deep threats, and Derek Carr was very successful in throwing it deep last, but they just didn't give him a lot of opportunities because the offensive line was not good at all, and the offensive play callers were very conservative over there. Pete Carmichael in New Orleans will let him have the green light to let it fly to guys like Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. And when you have that huge, that worry of guys who can beat you over the top at all times on defense, that's when you can really work the intermediate. You can get guys like Michael Thomas. You can get guys like Jawan Johnson, Alvin Kamara working the middle of the field. And there's just a lot of options on this team. And I'm not a big fan of the Saints rushing attack this year. I know Jamal Williams can score a lot of touchdowns in that goal line area, but that may have just been because the Detroit Lions had an elite offensive line of just amazing run blockers. I don't think the Saints are that good at run blocking as much as they are pass blocking. So I think Derek Carr can easily get to this 30 touchdown number with the weapons he has. Just throw about 2 touchdowns a game, Derek. It's not that hard. And that would also be very good for the Saints odds this year. Any other long shots that you have, Laraib?
One sneaky long shot I have for a team to make the playoffs, Lewis, is the Denver Broncos at plus 186. I think they're playing a really tough division. The AFC is tough this year, especially. But I think with Sean Payton in a head coach, Russell Wilson year 2, the defense in Denver is always going to be good. I think this year, if they can put it all together, they have the weapons, Lewis. It was really the coaching last year that was a big issue. We just saw how well Russell Wilson played in the last 2 games when Nat Hackett got fired. So I think, a lot of people are sleeping on. They play in a really, really tough division with my Chargers in there, Lewis. But I think they can be one of these, that division could be one of the divisions this year where 3 teams make the playoffs.
Yeah, and my long shot team to make the playoffs is actually going to be the Atlanta Falcons, Laraib. I think that they have, and potentially to win the division, because as much as of a Saints fan I am, and I hate the Falcons, I can't deny what they have built this offseason that I really like. I love the idea of building around a strong offensive line, and Arthur Smith knows how to use a strong offensive line, evidently in Tennessee. You build a strong running game with an amazing running back who I think Bijan will be. And even then you have a stud in Tyler Algier who's been there before. And then you build around him. They bring in a lot of amazing pieces defensively. You bring in an old vet like Calais Campbell. You bring in Jesse Bates and Jesse Bates on the defensive side of the ball. Just a lot of NFL players, which they were lacking the past few years defensively. So I think that defense will be better. And I think their offense can be so effective in the run game that it'll be able to give their defense long breaks, and their defense will, benefit from that. So I don't believe in Desmond. I don't think he's the guy. But I think, with this offensive system, it's going to be as friendly as possible. And he has good weapons on the outside with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Hopefully with another year of, full off-season training camp as the number 1 guy, he'll be able to thrive with this offense, Laraib.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Good, long shot for that one, Lewis. But let's quickly move on to some division winners that we like. If you like a favorite, we're not going to really go over that, but maybe some guys who are underdogs in division. Personally, I like in the AFC North, I like the Ravens at plus 210. Joe Burrow is going to be missing a couple of weeks in the season. This Ravens with the best defense, or, with the top 5 defense in the NFL, I think bringing in OBJ, having some guys healthy like Rashad Bateman back again. Lamar Jackson has something to prove this year, and I think the Ravens at plus 210 is a great value.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you're like me and got it at plus 250, then you're a smart man. I like the Titans at plus 330 in that division. The Jaguars did look like staying out of the pack at the end of the year, but you can't deny the Titans got better this offseason. No one really wants to talk about it. They beefed up the defense. Their offensive line got better with the first-round pick of Skoronski. And then you bring in DeAndre Hopkins in the passing game, and they were solely missing that true number 1 receiver. Another year of Treylon Burks in that offense. I think they can do a lot of that plus 330 value. But the conference, what's your value for the conference, Laraib? Who's going to the Super Bowl that you like?
My favorite has to be the 49ers at plus 400, not the favorite like the Eagles. But I think, if Brock Purdy can have some more of that magic that he had from last season, I think having them at plus 400 is a great value. A lot of these Super Bowl teams have some Super Bowl hangover, so the Eagles might not be that same team from last year. And so the 49ers, after years and years of trying to bang on that door and that loss to the Chiefs, maybe they can get back again this year.
Laraib, and I'm going to go with another team. I think the Dallas Cowboys at plus 600 to win the NFC. I think you're right. The Eagles might take a step back. I think the Cowboys, with the upgrades that they had, bringing Brandon Cooks, Stephon Gilmore on the outside, their defense looks really sharp. And I think, there's questions about losing Kellen Moore and having Mike McCarthy as the primary play caller. That definitely does worry me. But I just think they have way too much talent. And if they get there, they could easily win the NFC. And I like that number at 600 for value, Laraib. And then for a Super Bowl bet, my favorite value, and this might be the best value, but I don't care. It's still at plus 600. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. When they're in that game, and before the season, if you had to predict, gun to your head, 90% of the public would say the Chiefs, but it's at plus 600. So I don't mind. I think if they get into the game, they're always a safe bet to win. So I do like the Chiefs in this spot.
Yeah, plus 600. That's great odds for the Chiefs. But I like double dipping once again. The 49ers are plus 1,000. Kyle Shanahan, hopefully not actually, but, maybe he can put something together this year and will this 49ers defense into the Super Bowl, Lewis. But I think that is going to be it for our prop bets for this, early season predictions. Anything else to say, Lewis?
Nope, that'll be all. Thanks for tuning in to the First and Goal podcast. Signing out.
Peace.